Hi, welcome, Rabbi Natasha Mann. It is so nice to be with you. Today we're meeting together to talk about the Shofar. Tell us a couple of things about you. You are very welcome here.
Thank you so much for having me. As you mentioned, I'm Rabbi Natasha. I serve as a rabbi at New London Synagogue, which is on Abbey Road in St. John's Wood, and also at Hatch End Masorti Synagogue, which is also called Mosaic Masorti and is in Hatch End. And I also saw you just a few weeks ago at Noam Camp, because one of the multiple things I do with my with my rabbinic life is spending time at Noam Camp.
Noam Camp, our amazing and wonderful youth movement, which against all the odds met this year in different parts of the UK. Amazing work. Welcome. And today we are talking about the Shofar. What is the Shofar, Rabbi Natasha?
Well, I think it's slightly easier to show you than to tell you. So this is my shofar. A shofar is a horn from an animal. It's usually a ram, and it's a sort of musical instrument that we play during the High Holy Days. Usually what happens is you come to synagogue, and throughout the service, there's someone standing at the front who will blast specific types of blasts from the shofar. I actually have an interesting story about this particular shofar. See, for about 10 years, I thought of myself as someone who could not blow shofar. I tried a few times. People had handed me them and said, just give it a go. And I'd never managed to make it make a single sound. But then last summer, we came to the month of Elul, which is a month in which we get ready for Rosh Hashanah by blasting the shofar every day. And we were in lockdown. So I couldn't rely on other people to blast the shofar for me. And so I bought my own, and this is this shofar. And I tried every day, and I want to say for about 2 weeks, it was the same experience it had always been, of barely any sounds at all coming out. And after a few weeks of trying every day, I got a reedy little noise out of it. And by the time we were on Rosh Hashanah, I actually blew the shofar multiple hundred times throughout Rosh Hashanah. So amazing. I will say, if I can do it, anyone can do it, because it was real bad when it started out.
Okay, great. And so that's the shofar, and we blow it in preparation for Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, which is coming up very, very soon and fast. Why specifically do we blow it on Rosh Hashanah? Why do we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah?
So Rosh Hashanah is really the shofar's big day to shine. In the Torah, when we talk about Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't actually tell us that Rosh Hashanah is, Happy New Year. It doesn't tell us about apples and honey and some of those other rituals we might associate with Rosh Hashanah. The Torah calls Rosh Hashanah Yom Teruah, the day of the blasting of the shofar. So it's a really ancient sound connected with this day. And it's connected to multiple different symbols. So we talk about the shofar quite a bit in the Torah. It comes up in multiple different ways. I'd say my favorite of them to think about in this time of year is when we hear the blast of the shofar, this sort of piercing sound at Mount Sinai. That's the sort of big moment of revelation that happens once the Israelites have been taken out of Egypt. And I like that a lot, because there's a lot of what I'll call high drama that happens on Rosh Hashanah and also on Yom Kippur. By high drama, I mean we're sort of playing out the most intense aspects of our relationships with God, our relationships with the world, thinking about what it means to be human, what it means to be mortal. And it plays out in multiple ways. We see that in the wording and in the music, in our wearing white to synagogue. And I think also in this high drama of the sound of the cry of the shofar, it is part of the intensity of the period.
Wonderful. I mean, I can't think of a more intense relationship in the Torah, in relationship with the shofar, than that of, I think you mentioned when we spoke earlier, of Akedat Yitzchak, of the attempted sacrifice of Isaac by his father Abraham, and the shofar connects there to the lamb that's sacrificed in his place. Could there be a more crucial or more kind of devastating moment that links with the sound of the shofar, then that kind of moment of Abraham's utter dedication to God. Say a little bit more about that, how you approach that story.
I think it's a really, really interesting moment where we have this ram caught in the thicket that ends up being sacrificed in place of Isaac. What's interesting to me is sometimes when the rabbis talk about the connection between the Akedah, that story of binding, and what happens during the High Holy Days, sometimes it's thinking about the character of Abraham, but actually a lot of the time it's thinking about the character of Yitzchak, of Isaac, of the son. Like, what does it mean to be so surrendered and to surrender oneself so much to a higher power, to the fact that we don't have complete control over everything? And the story ends well because Yitzchak, in fact, does not get killed at the end of this story, and instead we have the sacrifice of the ram. But nonetheless, there's something that comes up in that moment of surrender, that moment of realization that we don't actually have maybe as much power over the world as we might imagine that we do day to day.
Wonderful teaching. Rabbi Natasha, it's been wonderful to welcome you today. I wish you and your community a happy and a sweet new year. The final word is with you.
I just want to say, throughout Rosh Hashanah, this is the sound of Rosh Hashanah. And when we had trouble in lockdown with the ability to hear shofar, I know that was something that really tugged at many people who went out to find ways to hear shofar. Any synagogue that you go to, it'd be lovely to have you at the Zorti synagogue for whoever's watching this, but any synagogue that you go to over Rosh Hashanah, you'll be able to participate in this amazing, dramatic, symbolic sound. But also it is entirely possible for you to do what I did and decide that, that you too can be someone who does the truah, the blasting of the shofar. I wish you all a Shana Tova U'Metuka, a sweet new year.
Thank you so much.